Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. As the time I'm recording this video, it's about 90 minutes since Grinding Games pushed live patch 0.1.0f. This is a patch that has enough in it to warrant me putting out a video about it, but it's also at the smaller end of what warrants a video. I generally will go through patches and give you a bit of a heads up as to what significance each of the patch note lines has. Now, of course, there are going to be things I'm going to skip over in this because there's a number of bug fixes that only apply to one particular build. For example, there is a very significant bug fix to the skill Rolling Slam. This was simply not working previously. Its aftershocks were not dealing damage. This is a big deal if you're playing with that skill, but I'm going to leave that sort of thing out of this video because it's not a thing that's pretty obvious. If you have a look at it yourself, you can go, yeah, it doesn't affect me, or maybe 1 in 50 of you, or maybe 1 in 100 of you, you're going, oh wow, that's what was going wrong. Okay, that's now fixed. That's the same with all the client crashes and things like that. I will point out though that Fiery Death support in party play, this was actually a fairly major issue, and this is something that was coming up a lot. Not that many people play in parties, but if you were, this is one of the more serious bugs that they've fixed. Now, I wanted to quickly go through Grinding Gear Games' numbering system for patches. Grinding Gear Games use a fairly standard patch number system where the number before the first dot is the major game version. So this is going to be 0 for the entirety of early access. Then once it goes out of early access, will be 1 point something. After that, the second number is the major game release. In Path of Exile 1, we're currently at 3.25, and the 25 means we're currently in Settlers League, 24 before that was Necropolis League, 23 before that was Affliction, and so on and so forth. Broadly speaking, this second number increments by 1 approximately once every 90 days, although it hasn't been consistent in Path of Exile 1 in recent times. After that, we have the minor version. There'll tend to be 2 or 3 larger patches in one of those league events. So, for instance, in Settlers League, I think it's currently 3.25.2, but it might be 3.25.3. Now, generally speaking, when Grinding Gear Games increment this number, they're making some moderate-sized system changes. They don't usually do game balance, but I think in early access they will. And on top of that, they'll also usually push a whole bunch of microtransactions live at that point as well. After that, we have the letter patches, and these tend to be bug fixes, emergency game patches, and the like. It's worth noting the patch where they added the checkpoint system to the game, that would normally have been a 0.1.1, and I'm not sure why Grinding Gear Games didn't call it that. That's how you read their patch numbers in general. There are 2 major changes that have been made here, as well as a bunch of smaller things. The first one is the sweeping changes that are being made to Delirium. Now, these are going to have more of an impact if you're someone who defers tapping the Delirium mirror until you've cleared out a fair bit of the map first. If you're in that situation, you would have been finding Delirium wasn't working very well, and that was because of a bug where when you encountered a rare monster, it's intended that you get a bit of extra time on your Delirium encounter. This is because rare monsters just take longer to kill than normal trash monsters. What was going wrong was that was being built up even before you ever touched the Delirium mirror. And so you could store up a whole bunch of this time, and the game gave you no indication that there was a whole bunch of saved up pause time. And so you would wind up finding yourself tapping the Delirium mirror and then, where's all the monsters? What's going on? Why isn't this working properly? This is being fixed, and now when you open a Delirium mirror, the mist will now work as it's intended to. The other change that's being made here is part of a 1-2 punch for strongboxes. Strongboxes are in a terrible state at the moment. Grinding Gear Games know and admit they're in a terrible state at the moment. They're doing a very small change first, something that they can do quickly, before they then do more work on strongboxes later. The Delirium Mist is now going to pause for 10 seconds when you open a strongbox, where previously it had been 5. Strongboxes work really well in Path of Exile 1. If you haven't played both games, if you only played PoE 2, then you're probably familiar at endgame. You open a strongbox and it just feels like it's an eternity. 1 pack spawns, then a couple of seconds later another pack spawns, a couple seconds later another pack spawns, and the entire encounter might last 30 seconds, but it never feels particularly intense. In PoE 1, the instant you tap that strongbox, you get all 3 or sometimes 4 or more packs that just spawn immediately. That's the way they work there, and it tends to work a lot better. And there's also one mod that can roll on strongboxes in PoE 1 that causes monsters to keep appearing for a while afterwards, kind of like the behavior in PoE 2, but that mod, there's still a lot more density than there is in PoE 2 strongboxes. So, strongboxes, this is the small fix, the big fix is coming soon. The second change that's being made is not going to affect anywhere near as many people, but this is going to be a very, very big one for a small number of people. There has been an interaction with the Adorned Unique Jewel. This comes from the Trial Master. It's super rare and it's super valuable if you get a high rolled version of it. And Time Lost Jewels. Time Lost Jewels and the Adorned, their interaction was broken in two ways. When I say broken, that can mean that it's not working as the developers intended, or it can mean it's working as intended, but it's far more powerful than the developers had designed it to be. Well, this is simultaneously not working as intended and far more powerful than the developers designed it to be. Content creator Captain Lance 9 did a video recently, which I'll put a link to down in the description below, on how this interaction used to work. It is now being patched. In fact, it has already been patched, so it no longer works the way Captain Lance details in that. But if you have a look at that video, you'll see that it was clearly not intended. It was clearly both stronger than intended and doing something completely different to what was intended. However, the way Grinding Gear Games are fixing this is making the Adorned quite simply not work at all on Time Lost Jewels. I feel like there was space for it to still work, but to work as intended, as actually written on the item, and I feel that would have been the more interesting choice, but maybe they decided they had to get a patch out quickly there. As for the rest of the changes here, most of these are pretty small. The Fiery Death support one is probably the most significant of these, and again, it's not going to affect everyone. There's some things with itemization changes and overflowed life and overflowed mana and the like. These are being fixed here. There's also going to be the changes to Zelmrath the Colossus. One of the abilities that boss was using were a bit nastier than intended. This is the Titan boss in the middle of Act 2. And then there's also a fix to ritual altars that has come up for me exactly once, that bug. Also, fix a client crash that could occur on PlayStation 5. I don't know if this is the patch that people were waiting for on PlayStation 5 or not. Hopefully it was. Hopefully it addresses a lot of the problems that people have been having on that platform, but we shall see. Anyways, this is not a sweeping balance patch. That's likely to be 0.1.1. I'm hoping that comes out early next week, but it'll come out when it's ready. I'm going to leave it there. May Varlorbs have interesting results.